And now the King is ill, Harry has even offered to muck in and take on official duties to help his father. Look, I want to see reconciliation and love and joy, but I'm afraid Meghan has yet to even speak to her father as far as we know, and Harry didn't apparently even reach out to his brother. Whilst his dad might fall for it, I doubt William will be as soft. Good luck with that, Harry.
Morning, 9:30 on Thursday, the 21st of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GBNews. I wasn't sure I was.
It's been a long week.
I'm Andrew Pearce, this is Bev Turner, I think.
Oh, here we are for now. 3 staff suspended employees at the London clinic are being investigated for allegedly looking at the Princess of Wales's medical records. Will the royal family use this hospital again?
Clearly a very serious issue for the London clinic and indeed Kensington Palace. Meanwhile, investigations are ongoing as to whether criminal prosecutions are warranted. More details shortly.
And is a government minister onto something here? The Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, is suggesting that we've got too soft about mental health. He thinks it's gone too far, and I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah. And a leading charity wants all political parties to put a ban on mobile phones for the under-16s in their election manifesto. What do you think about that?
And birth rates are plummeting. A new study shows Britain will be heavily reliant on immigration for the remainder of the century. We're being warned of a staggering social change. It's already happening.
And state pension promise. Rishi Sunak is set to guarantee pensioners that the triple lock will remain in place under a future Conservative government.
Most people never heard of Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, but I think he's onto something here. Isn't everybody complaining about their mental health now? Hundreds of thousands of people no longer going to work because of their mental health.
The bar in relation to what we consider to be emotional, mental, psychological well-being feels very, very low now, doesn't it? Unfortunately, the pendulum has swung very, very far in that direction. And you know what? Work is good for your mental health. Obviously, some people really struggle.
Of course.
And there's a difference.
But he's going to make a speech today and he's going to set out how the government's going to try and get at least 150,000 more people who say they've got mental health issues back into the workplace. Good on him.
Not easy, though. Let us know all of your thoughts this morning. Get involved. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 9:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. Government plans to deport migrants to Rwanda have been set back again after the House of Lords inflicted a series of defeats on the bill. 7 proposed changes, including a provision to ensure due regard for domestic and international law, were passed by peers. The bill will now be delayed until after Easter, when MPs will have to vote again. The legislation aims to revive the government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Bank of England is expected to hold interest rates at 5.25% for the 5th time in a row today. It comes after the inflation rate dropped faster than expected in February, hitting 3.4% during the month, the lowest for 2.5 years. It's good news for the Bank of England and its decision-makers on the Monetary Policy Committee. They still expect rates to be held steady as they meet today, and the decision will be announced at midday. A long-awaited report into women's state pensions will be published today. The review will look at how increases in retirement ages have affected women born in the 1950s. An ombudsman has been looking at potential injustices resulting from the decision to raise women's retirement age to bring it in line with men's in 2010. And it's bad news for chocolate lovers, as some Easter eggs are at least 50% more expensive this year. Researchers are blaming climate change for the increase after dry weather in West Africa led to a spike in global cocoa prices. Brands including Maltesers, Lindt and Cadbury's cost at least 50% more than a year ago, while others have shrunk in size, and that's according to Which. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Hello, welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So 3 staff members from the London clinic are being investigated over allegations they tried to access the Princess of Wales' medical files. They could face prosecution, of course, under data protection laws.
The Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, confirmed the police have been asked to look at the case. Joining us in the studio is a political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister, and barrister and columnist for The Perspective, Sam Fowles. So, good morning, Sam Fowles, if I can start with you. Just explain to us from a legal point of view what's at the heart of this story.
Right, this is everyone's favourite phrase, data protection.
There's personal data and then there's sensitive personal data. And sensitive personal data is anything to do with things like your health or your political opinions. And that's the level of information that we give the highest level of protection to.
Yeah.
So if you're holding this data on the part of someone, you've got to have high levels of security, and you can't be doing anything with it unless you've got a very good reason. And so in the case of this leak, what the Information Commission will be looking at is, were there sufficient safeguards in place? What sort of harm has occurred as a result of this data leak? And in some circumstances, the repercussions could be very, very serious.
So, Sam, if they've just looked at it, maybe just for prurient reasons, or maybe they were hopefully trying to flog it, but if they've just seen the information, but it's gone no further, is that against the law?
It's not. If you're a medical professional and you're looking at someone's medical data,
Yeah, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're an ancillary worker at the clinic.
and that's where the line is drawn. If you are someone that doesn't have an entitlement to that data, doesn't have a good reason to be looking at that data, then it is a data breach.
So that's
Whether you just look at
so that's against the criminal law.
That's against the data protection law, and it could be against the criminal law depending on the level of seriousness. So if you are in the situation where you're not just looking at it, you're flogging it, well then we may be in criminal territory there.
And would that apply to the doctors who are working in the hospital but not specifically charged with her care? So her team, understandably, would need to look at the notes, Princess of Wales. But if you're just somebody treating somebody else in the hospital and you decide to be a little bit nosy, do you have a right to do that as a medic?
No, I don't think you would, because the thing with sensitive personal data, there's a very, very limited set of circumstances that you can access it. And obviously one of those circumstances is medical necessity, but that key word is necessity.
Right.
So just being a bit curious that whether you've got doctor in front of your name or not doesn't make that a necessity.
Right, OK. Sam Lister, let's bring you in. This is a terrible PR disaster for the hospital, isn't it?
I mean, it's awful. I mean, I'd like to say I'm surprised. I'm not.
No.
I mean, it was kind of inevitable when you've got a story of this magnitude that somebody was going to do this. But I think it is incredibly disappointing. I hope the full force of the law is brought to bear on these people if they are found to have misused this data or even looked at it for their own personal gratification. It is incredibly...
It's voyeuristic.
I mean, it is.
Isn't it?
And it just breaches every single boundary of trust. You know, for anybody going into hospital has the right to privacy.
Let alone whether you're the Princess of Wales.
Exactly.
It's funny, though, isn't it, that it's happened in this instance, and yet when the Queen was ill and in hospital, we never had this. We didn't have it the same with
I guess because she was
other
95,
royals.
96. So,
what-
but this is a very beautiful 42-year-old
Exactly. And
young
people
mum.
are... And we know that the whole world is curious. The whole world wants to know.
Exactly.
But there is a whole difference
Was she
between
96? Well, she's an old lady.
Yeah.
And she's bound to have health issues.
And I just want to make clear that, actually, if these people had tried to sell this information, the British press would not have bought
wouldn't
it.
touch it with a barge pole.
No, but they could have sold it abroad. And I think that...
Think America.
Exactly. And I think that's the problem. You know, this is very tempting if you're in that situation that you can make a lot of money by selling this information, but you would not be able to do that in the
There is
UK.
worldwide interest
Yeah.
in the Princess of Wales.
Yeah.
She's one of the most famous women on the planet.
And it's interesting, yesterday, Downing Street, they normally are very, very clear to make a distinction between, you know, we don't talk about the royals, but they actually went as far yesterday to say, look, everybody has a right to a private life, and this is, you know, they took that step because obviously this is really a breach of trust, and they wanted to make it clear that this
And
has to
Rishi
stop.
will have talked to the King in his weekly audience, and he'll probably have talked to Prince William too.
Yeah.
He'll know all about it.
Exactly.
From a legal point of view then, Sam, would a complaint have to be made by the Princess herself?
No. the way that data protection law works is it doesn't matter if anyone complains. In fact, the responsibility lies with the hospital to disclose if there is a data breach. So if you're losing data, you've got a legal responsibility to admit it.
Right.
And the hospital could be looking at fines potentially in the region of millions if this turns out to be very serious.
So it would be a fine rather than somebody being potentially incarcerated?
Well, there is a possibility of individuals being incarcerated, but there's also the possibility of the organisation being penalised for losing the data.
Devastating for a clinic like the London Clinic, which is famous around the world for looking after royalty, people who've got a lot of money.
Really, really tough, and but for any clinic, right, as well, because there is. I just googled NHS data leak this morning when I was preparing for this, and there is a list of various different hospitals and trusts where patients' data has been leaked online, been sent. There was one case where 20 trusts leaked it to Facebook, and
what, inadvertently?
I think part of it was inadvertent, certainly, but there is also deliberate plans to sell patient data that are being considered as well. So it's really, really good, I think, that this story is kind of making us focus on how important health information is and how personal and private and sort of it's about your personhood, isn't it?
It is.
It's really good we're focusing on that because it's a much wider conversation across the health sector we need to have.
Completely, and especially as we're moving towards so much of our data being online and particularly all our NHS data being in one place on your little app. This raises really important questions.
Definitely.
Let's move on to a story on your front page, Sam.
Just before you do, I'm so sorry. I just need to give a clinic statement. So everyone at the London Clinic, says the hospital, is acutely aware of our individual, professional, ethical and legal duties with regards to patient confidentiality. We take enormous pride in the outstanding care and discretion we aim to deliver for all our patients that put their trust in us every day. They continue, we have systems in place to monitor management of patient information and in the case of any breach, all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken. There's no place at our hospital for those who intentionally breach the trust of any of our patients or colleagues.
Well, if there is no place, if they have breached it, they've got to be fined at the very least. Let's move on to a great story on the front page of the Daily Express, written by our very own Sam Lister, the political editor. Now, a lot of pensioners will have felt very fed up with the budget. No tax cuts for them. And also the autumn statement when we had the first national insurance cut, Sam, that didn't apply to pensioners either. The triple lock, Rishi Sunak saying, will be there under future Tory government. Remind people what the triple lock is and why it's important.
The triple lock protects pensioners. It means that every year when the state pension rises, it goes up by a minimum of 2.5%, but it can go up by more. So it's linked also to inflation and wages. And so that's meant that over the last 2 years, we've had big rises, 8.5% in April, coming in this April, 10% last year. And that's because of inflation and wage rises. Obviously, that's really costly. And so there's always a question about, is the triple lock going to remain? Will the parties ditch it? Because it runs out basically this year. So we know now, the Conservative Party have told me that this will be in their manifesto. Come what may, the triple lock will be in their manifesto. I think that's something that our readers are very, very keen to hear. I'm sure your viewers too. So now we need to hear, will Labour match it?
How much expensive... Well, we don't know how expensive it is because inflation is tumbling very fast. But is there a recognition also that they may have got it wrong with the budget and the autumn statement, not cutting taxes for pensioners?
I think they're conscious because obviously the national insurance cut helps workers. It doesn't help pensioners. So pensioners were hoping for an income tax cut. That didn't happen. So I think this is a very conscious move to say, look, actually, we're really conscious that pensioners rely on the triple lock to get a good rise every year, and we will stick to it. So I think they really want to make clear that they are thinking about pensioners when it comes to writing that manifesto.
Do you know, I was at a book launch last night in Westminster, Michael Ashcroft's book about
Angela Rayner,
the Deputy Labour leader. Not a single Tory MP I spoke to had a good word to say about the budget. Not one. They thought it was a waste of time.
I think it fell a bit flat, didn't it? But I mean, actually, it's a huge amount of money. I mean, £900 over the last 6 months.
In your national insurance?
In a tax cut for workers, but it doesn't seem to have really hit home with people.
It really didn't. Right,
Sam and Sam, don't go anywhere. You'll be back after the break, and we're going to be talking about this Work and Pension Secretary, we've just been talking about him, clamping down on the scroungers.
Good.
Who is in the firing line? What is the line between a mental health condition and actually just swinging the legs? You don't have to go to work. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners. And Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of estrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, has cursed a bit of a storm this morning.
And I'm glad he has, because he says Britain's approach to mental health is in danger of going too far because normal anxieties of life are now being labelled as mental health. He wants to get more Brits back into the workplace.
So let's talk to Joe Hemmings, behavioural psychologist, friend of the show. Morning, Joe. Where does the line lie, do you think, between people who genuinely are struggling to get out of bed in the morning, repeated days of depression or anxiety, and those who are using it as an excuse, like a bad back in the 80s?
I think the line lies between getting people to understand, and that probably starts in schools, learning resilience, and learning to understand that it's OK to have a bit of mild anxiety or a bit of stress. They're all right. They're not a behavioural disorder. They're not a mental health issue that should prevent you from work. So I think what we've got is a scenario where, yes, it's great, people are talking about their mental health more, but actually, are they understanding it? There's a lot of self-diagnosis going on. There's a lot of GPs who are willing to say, fine, I'll sign you off quickly because it's easier for them and understand the pressure they're under. And we've got, out of 2.5 million people unemployed, 2/3 of those, or not working, and 2/3 of those have mental health disorders. Well, stress and anxiety of a mild form is not a disorder. And I just think if that message could be delivered at an earlier stage, you wouldn't have this issue.
This idea as well, it's like modern life, we put all this emphasis on leisure time and look after yourself and prioritise your rest, whereas actually work is good for people, and we've forgotten that, Joe.
That's what he's saying in his speech.
Is that right?
Work is good for your mental health.
Getting out and having a purpose in the morning, as anyone will tell you, it might not feel like much fun when your alarm goes off, but get out and do it and you feel better.
Oh, it's such a good point. Again, that needs to be taught. Work is not just about earning money. It's about being with other people. It's getting satisfaction. It's having a reason to get up. It's personal goals. You know, it's sort of sociability. It's perspective. Actually, I think if people work, they've got mild anxiety and they've got a good work structure that understands that people go through these sorts of things, then work is a godsend for those people, because otherwise you've got too much time at home worrying about, you know, and fretting about your anxiety, therefore probably amplifying it. When you're at work in a good understanding work environment, you will get the sort of perspective where that just might disappear without any medical intervention whatsoever.
Yeah, OK, Joe, thank you for clarifying that. Short but sweet. We've got to love you and leave you. We've got the Sams in the studio, Joe Hemmings there. Sam, it's a very difficult one, this, isn't it? Because you don't want to make those people who are suffering from a pathological, clinical medical illness, mental illness, to get lumped in with those people who just can't be bothered to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I think this really upset me, actually, these comments from Mel Stride. As someone who's diagnosed with anxiety and depression disorders and has struggled with that for years, seeing sort of that community weaponised by Mel in just clearly another way to sort of try and re-suss this kind of scroungers and strivers thing that worked for them in previous elections. In fact, if you are really interested in dealing with that problem, then let's see them not punishing people who are undergoing mental health crisis, but fixing the reasons that they are in this position. We have an NHS that currently we're having to treat people in mental health crisis in A&E because they haven't properly provided mental health services. We've got a situation where more and more young people are struggling with mental health issues and receiving zero help for it at all. So what I would like to see is politicians, instead of saying, I'm going to take people who are already suffering and punish them further in order to, you know, win a couple of votes, let's see a proper set of policies that is going to deal with this, the core of this issue.
He's trying to say there are 2.4 million people, young people, on sickness benefit permanently. Why? I don't buy it. I don't buy that we've got this huge outbreak of mental illness. I think people are swinging the lead, they're skiving, and the number have increased since 700,000 since COVID. They didn't go to work during COVID and they don't want to go back.
Well,
that's what it's about.
Part of the reason people are on long-term sickness is it takes 6 months to get an appointment in the NHS if you're lucky. So that's key. So that's thing number one that's keeping people out of work. And I think it's right that more people are talking about mental health because we are better educated about it, so we understand some of these problems. But the idea that you can just get signed off after 7 minutes with a GP, number one, if he's not happy with that, we'll then put some money into GPs so GPs can spend a proper amount of time with patients. And two, it's also just not true.
Sam,
if you want to get signed off, you have to go through a longer process.
Well, I mean,
the bleeding heart liberal here.
The 7-minute appointment, 94% of people who have this 7-minute appointment with a GP are signed off. 94%. I mean, that cannot be right.
Of course it can't.
It cannot be right. This is a huge problem. The welfare bill is ballooning.
Yeah.
And this is... Working age people should be in work.
Yes.
The default should be that people who can work should be in work. We have to find a way of people who have mental health problems being in the workplace. It's not that you physically cannot do it. As Mel Stride says, working is good for your mental health.
Yes.
People getting up, having a purpose, having a reason to get dressed, to get out, to socialise, is good for your mental health.
Let us understand then, from your personal perspective, we don't have a huge amount of time, but if you don't mind revealing a little bit about your experience, Sam, what is the difference between a day when you can be here on the telly and being brilliant and being a lawyer and dynamic, and the days when you literally can't do that?
There's days when I am scared of everything and absolutely terrified to leave the house, terrified to talk to people, terrified to leave my bed. And I can deal with that, and I've been able to deal with that through private healthcare. because I've got a job that pays me very well, and so I can spend money on that. But these things started when I was a student, and I was on a bursary of 15k. And what I was offered was group therapy on the NHS. And given that sort of my particular issues manifest around being in groups, it was so I could wait for 6 months for something that was likely to make me worse. I got lucky. Got a job that allowed me to pay for therapy, pay for medication.
We're running out of time. And I think my worry is that people who genuinely do struggle like you and manage it really well are going to get lumped in with those who are not completely understanding. And you need someone in your life to say, get up, get out of bed,
go to work.
come on.
Stop
Don't
swinging
go anywhere.
the lead.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Fine in the south today, some warm sunshine even, but a very different story for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where it is already turning wet and windy. The heaviest of the rain and the strongest winds affecting western Scotland. Bands of rain also moving through eastern and southern Scotland at times, although with some drier spells in between. And then through the late morning and early afternoon, that rain reaches Northern Ireland. Now for England and Wales, bit of rain for the far north of England, but otherwise plenty of dry weather, even some sunny spells, less breezy here, but even so, out of the breeze, it's going to feel pleasant enough, 15, 16 Celsius. Then the rain tumbles its way southwards overnight. It's going to affect northern England during the evening as well as parts of Wales before it tends to fizzle out and slow down on its journey south. It will eventually end up in the southwest, where it will be a damp start to the day. But the southeast avoids it through much of the night, although staying cloudy here and, as a result, frost-free. But a cold start to the day for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Showers from the word go, interspersed by sunny spells, but it's not going to feel very spring-like with those showers coming in heavy at times and with snow falling above 500 metres for Scotland. The wind very strong in the north and northwest, brighter spells emerging across southern and southeastern parts later, but feeling colder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Didn't quite believe it and still can't. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm sure you have seen this video that went viral this week, and if you haven't, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. This is a firefighter leaning on a fence whilst watching a trapped driving instructor's car sink in 4 feet of floodwater. Looks very comfortable there, doesn't he? Just leaning against the fence.
Just chilling, just relaxing. Yeah, there were there were in fact 2 Essex fire and rescue crews, an ambulance and a police car parked near the sinking vehicle, but they wouldn't enter the water because they had to wait for specialist crews who were trained for the water depth.
Well, 2 people who weren't going to sit back and watch were these 2, Jack and Danielle Price, who took it upon themselves to rescue the submerged driver. And Danielle joins us now. Very good morning to you, Danielle, and you are a hero, an absolute hero. What happened in this video? Make sense of it for us.
So we were filming in the area for our YouTube channel, and we've seen the fire brigade come through. I was actually out at 5 o'clock in the morning with my husband, Jamie. we know it always happens there, as you can see, and it was clear. We've seen the fire brigade come through, we've followed them, and they're just standing around as if nothing's happened. In the clip, it says he's fine, he's on his phone, and then sort of walked away. But what they failed to realise is when my partner actually opened the door, as you can hear, he's on the phone to the sort of the emergency crew in panic, thinking he's going to sink. So we could not just sit there and watch. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah, poor bloke. Well done, you. Do you reckon this is health and safety gone mad?
It is, because although I do sympathise with them, they are so red-taped, but surely sort of common sense has to kick in as open the door.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Monday, the 21st of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
So 3 staff have been suspended. They are employees at the London clinic. They're being investigated for allegedly poring over the Princess of Wales medical records.
Potentially very serious for the London clinic and Kensington Palace. Investigations ongoing to see if criminal prosecutions are warranted. More details shortly.
And is it time for us all to toughen up? Find out why the Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride thinks that mental health culture has gone too far.
And a leading charity wants all political parties to put a ban on mobile phones for under-16s in their election manifesto.
A Metropolitan Police diversity team has come under fire for sharing videos that include claims that black women have to work harder than their white colleagues. Could that be true?
A year ago, the Casey Review said that the Met was institutionally racist. They've fought back against the claim, but we've uncovered footage of their diversity teams complaining about systemic bias in the force. I'll have all the latest this hour.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. GB Views at gbnews.com. And while Sophia Wensler reads your news, we're going to go and check the emails.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour. Government plans to deport migrants to Rwanda have been set back again after the House of Lords inflicted a series of defeats on the bill. 7 proposed changes, including a provision to ensure due regard for domestic and international law, were passed by peers. The bill will now be delayed until after Easter, when MPs will have to vote on the bill again. The legislation aims to revive the government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. It comes after yesterday was a record day in the Channel as 450 migrants crossed in small boats, the highest number this year so far. The Bank of England is expected to hold the interest rate at 5.25% for the 5th time in a row today. It comes after the inflation rate dropped faster than expected in February, hitting 3.4% during the month, the lowest for 2.5 years. It's good news for the Bank of England and its decision-makers on the Monetary Policy Committee. They still expect the rate to be held steady as they meet today, and the decision will be announced at midday. A long-awaited report into women's state pensions will be published today. The review will look at how increases in retirement ages have affected women born in the 1950s. An ombudsman has been looking at potential injustices resulting from the decision to raise women's retirement age to bring it in line with men's in 2010. Campaigners say millions of women suffered financially as they were not warned about the rise ahead of time. The Work and Pensions Secretary is warning that Britain's mental health culture has gone too far. Speaking as he unveiled plans to get 150,000 people back into a job, Mel Stride said that the benefits bill was being pushed up by a sharp increase in the number of people who are on long-term sickness. In an interview with the Telegraph newspaper, he suggested an increased public focus on talking about mental health had led to people self-diagnosing conditions. It comes as the welfare bill is set to hit £100 billion this year. Shadow Work and Pensions Minister Alison McGovern says Labour has a plan.
What needs to be addressed is to make sure that we have good work in this country that supports people's good mental health, as I just mentioned. And alongside that, we need a mental health system as part of our NHS that can really help people. You know, if you're a child or a young person needing mental health support, the waiting list can be years long, and that's not good enough. So we need Labour's plan to support our health service, including mental health support, with 8,500 extra mental health workers, so that we can improve that quality of service for people. That's Labour's plan.
In other news, 3 staff members from the London clinic are being investigated over allegations that they tried to access the Princess of Wales medical files. The individuals could face prosecution under the data protection laws and also could be sued for damages by Catherine. It's understood the King's medical records were not compromised when he was treated at the same hospital for an enlarged prostate. The London clinic has promised investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken. And it's bad news for chocolate lovers, as some Easter eggs are at least 50% more expensive this year. Researchers are blaming climate change for the increase after dry weather in West Africa led to a spike in global cocoa prices. Brands, including Maltesers, Lindt and Cadbury, cost at least 50% more than a year ago, while others have shrunk in size, and that's according to Which. The Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit says the price hike is down to the impacts of climate change, worsened by the El Niño phenomenon, a natural reoccurring fluctuation in weather patterns in the tropical Pacific. And a paralysed man has appeared to play chess online after receiving a brain chip from Elon Musk's company Neuralink. A video posted online shows a patient who has no movement below his shoulders, moving a cursor across a laptop screen with nothing but his thoughts. The video shows him playing chess and turning off the laptop's music. 29-year-old Noland Arbar, who was paralysed after a driving accident, is the first patient to receive the chip.
It became intuitive for me to start imagining the cursor moving. Basically, it was like using the force on a cursor, and I could get it to move wherever I wanted, just stare somewhere in the screen and it would move where I wanted it to. Which was such a wild experience.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
10:06 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So you've been getting in touch at home. Thank you very much about the Royal Records breach. Howard in Somerset. Morning, Howard. Has said in your discussion on the attempted medical records breach, you do not state if the Royal records were actually accessed.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know. This is the thing, Howard. If not, it would be immensely reassuring to report the hospital systems were sufficiently robust to have prevented this, rather than implying that their system put patients' records at risk of exposure.
My hunch is there's been something pretty serious to suspend staff for the hospital to talk to the Kensington Palace.
Yeah.
I don't think it's somebody just thought, oh, let's have a go, because lots of people could do that.
Yeah.
I think I'd be pretty amazed if somebody hasn't got to it.
Absolutely.
But whether they could do anything with the information is another matter.
I guess they could. It's whether they have.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen it in any American publications or Australian publications, whatever.
God, imagine if somebody
publicised it. It would be horrific.
But everybody would follow it. That's the terrible
Yeah, they
thing.
would.
It would be follow my leader.
Immense curiosity. We have to remind ourselves that privacy is important. Privacy is important for all individuals. Mental health, Paul, there are days when I get very anxious, but you have to make a decision in life whether you're going to give up and rely on social services or take personal responsibility and deal with it. The worst thing I did for my mental health was to retire at 45. And Jamie's cross with you. How dare Andrew slag off people with mental health problems?
I didn't slag them off.
If the NHS invested in mental health, the country would be a better place. People don't get the care they need.
What I'm saying is, just to be clear, 2.4 million people, many of them very young, no longer working, on full-time. We're paying for them because a lot of them are saying it's their mental health. I don't buy it. That's what I'm saying. I do not buy that many people have mental health issues. And I think Mel Stride's got a point. Get a grip. It's what we used to call the difficulties of life.
Do you know what I think a lot of the youngsters as well, what they lack? They call it mental health, but they lack confidence.
Yeah.
They don't believe in themselves anymore. They don't believe they've got anything to contribute.
Yeah.
They don't believe there's any point going to work because they're going to make a low wage and then they look on Instagram and someone's living in a £6 million house.
And they'll never be able to afford to buy a house.
Very difficult. And Rowena, yeah, absolutely echoes this. Rowena says, my son's now 53. He's worked for a maximum of 7 years in his life. He smoked cannabis in his teens. I asked the police for help, but they just told me that cannabis will be legal in 5 years anyway. He sofa surfs, get minimal benefits, and told me I haven't got the work ethic. When he did work, he did well, but he was made redundant a couple of times, and just days after being told how well he was doing and how pleased they were with his work. And it's that, isn't it, Rowena? Yeah. It's that being able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, these youngsters, and somehow go out. And no, life's not going to be perfect. No. It's not going to be amazing. You're not going to be happy every day. And you're not meant to be happy every day. It's not what being human looks like.
It's called life. Life isn't easy. Mel Stride is saying this. As a culture, we seem to have forgotten that work is good for mental health. It's a very old-fashioned dictum, and it's right.
It is. Keep your messages coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. Right, 3 staff members from this London clinic have been suspended over claims they tried to access Princess Kate's medical records.
They could face prosecution under data protection laws, be sued if the data protection breach is proven.
The King was also, of course, treated by the clinic in January for the issue with his prostate, but it's understood that his records were not affected.
Well, joining us in the studio is a great friend of this programme, the royal correspondent and writer Michael Cole. Michael, never seems to stop, does it, this story? 3 people suspended. People are asking us by email and text, do we know for a fact whether her records were accessed? It strikes me that they must have been, for it to have been taken so seriously by the clinic, who've already apologised to Kensington Palace.
Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Bev. The question of the hour is, why no arrests? The Metropolitan Police issued a statement saying they're not even aware of a referral by the London clinic to the Information Commissioner's office. He's our guardian, he's our watchdog on privacy. And under the 2018 Data Protection Act, it is illegal, it is a crime to obtain, to retain, or to disclose information, data, without the express permission of the data controller. In this case, the building we're looking at right there, the London Clinic, prestigious, most famous hospital in this country, the resort of famous and royal personages from around the world when they have medical problems. And all we've heard is that 3 members of staff have been suspended. Now, it would seem to me, I mean, they haven't got this information off a clipboard on the end of the princess's bed. It's been hacked out of the data system, the internet system, the computer system that they have at the hospital. And that would leave a very, very definite trail, which is easy to follow. Now, these are all allegations, but if they happened, we need to know that the police are on the job. But according to their spokesman, they haven't even been informed of this referral. So until that happens, nothing can happen, apart from us to say, and which we do, it was vile if it happened, it was despicable, and it was illegal. It was a felony, a serious crime that can be punished by an unlimited fine. Unfortunately, no jail time is associated with that, but it is being taken very seriously.
Michael, over the years, how have the royals chosen their medical teams? They must surely have people that have worked with the family for years, and because the trust issue is so important.
Yeah. Well, they have, the Queen had a number of physicians, 2 or 3, who were called upon from time to time. Indeed, one of them used to do my annual medical in South Kensington. That was just his day job, but actually he was one of the Queen's physicians. And obviously, they have the very best people on call, and they are people they know and they trust, and they go to the palace or wherever that royal personage just happens to be. And it's all done very, very discreetly. And it always used to be done at the King Edward VII Hospital, which used to be called the King Edward VII Hospital for Officers. And indeed, Andrew will know this, in 1963, history was made because the Queen went to that very hospital to receive the resignation of Harold Macmillan after the Humo scandal. Now, it was very, very sad and hugely tragic. You will remember, Bev, that the Princess of Wales, when she was Duchess of Cambridge, she went into that very same hospital, King Edward VII, with severe morning sickness. And during that time, two morons on the radio in Australia rang the hospital for their radio show live, and they pretended to be Prince Charles and the Queen. And a poor, tragic nurse gave them some innocuous information. And of course, it created a scandal. That poor woman, who was the mother of 2 children, an overseas nurse who came here to work and do a good job, she committed suicide. So these are not trivial matters. People may be thinking, well, giving this story too much emphasis, but around the world, and you know it because you're looking at the world's press, it's number 1 or 2 story if it's not number 1.
Yeah.
So these are serious matters. And what I'm asking this morning is, what's the Met doing about it?
OK, Michael, thank you so much. We're asking the same question.
We are, because if they've been suspended and the law's been broken, why aren't the police investigating it?
And that could be...
Because the Health Minister, and Maria Corville, said they're aware of it and they should be doing something about it.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That could be 3 doctors who get struck off from a moment of stupidity, nosiness, you know, idiot.
Because what we don't know...
Just have a quick look. You can imagine, can't you?
Is it mawkish? Is it voyeurism? Or was somebody trying to make some money?
Yeah, it's
which is really
very
sinister.
different. Right, a spokesperson for the London Clinic has said, we have systems in place to monitor management of patient information, and in the case of any breach, all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken. There is no place at our hospital for those who intentionally breach the trust of any of our patients or colleagues.
So, up next, the Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride. He's upset people. He's upset the Labour Party, for sure, because he said people should stop using mental health as an excuse not to get a job. Do you agree? Is the system being manipulated? I think he's right. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Is a debate on gender really a far-right issue?
Far right. I'm so bored of that phrase, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks about... anyone who acknowledges that there are 2 sexes is suddenly far right, because that's what Hitler and Mussolini were all about. This question from Shirley is, of course, about Labour. They've been accused of being undemocratic because they pressured a pub into cancelling a debate, and this debate features Kelly J. Keane, who's been on this show a couple of times, and she's a campaigner, and she was just on the panel, and then they got a letter saying that they couldn't do it because Kelly J. Keane apparently attracts far-right groups. Now, they've tried this trick before, but because some awful, ghastly neo-Nazi types turned up near to an event that she was holding in Australia, they kind of tried to blame that on her and suggest that the two were the same thing. They weren't. That was an opportunistic group turning up to... They're not... Neo-Nazis aren't pro-feminist. They're not pro an event called Let Women Speak. That's just ridiculous.
New Zealand's TV blurred her touching her zip because they said that her touching her zip was a far-right dog whistle because she's making that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting a zip.
Yeah, and also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting a top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly...
Yeah.
I mean, this is learning stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's so not far right.
But also,
I mean,
even if she were right-wing, which she isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you
well,
if you
no,
say that, will they? Because you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, and the unfashionable workplace.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:18. There's all noises off here. I mean, I don't know why Bev and I are even bothered because we've got Carmelo causing noises here, the writer and broadcaster.
It's all
and
professional.
Political commentator Jonathan Lister.
It's all professional chatter. We're just deciding what stories we're going to.
Well, both Bev and I think this is a really important story. The Work and Pension Secretary saying enough.
Yes, he is saying it.
That's what he's saying. It's gone on too long. This mental health culture.
Mental health. The tide is turning. I feel it's turning. There was the Kemi Badnock report this week. It wasn't hers, but she commissioned it independently, and that was about diversity schemes in companies. She's telling companies they don't work, scrap them, they cost too much money. Now we've got Mel Stride, who's the Work and Pension Secretary, saying that the mental health culture is out of control, and we know it is. We know that there are 3 million people who are off work. A lot of those are with mental health problems. A lot of those happened after the pandemic, and they're claiming benefits, which Stride is basically saying we can't afford. New rules were put in place that would define what a mental health issue was. And what it should have been more specific about, it should have been directed at people who are suicidal. It was never meant to be directed at people who've got a bit of anxiety, who are a bit bluesy, a bit fed up. And what Stride is saying is what's happening is young people are going to the doctor, and after 3 or 4 minute consultation, they're being signed off with a mental health issue. And there's no requirement for them to come back to work with that, which means they could be off for a year, 2 years, whatever. And that's costing a fortune.
And as Stride says in his report, it's a very old-fashioned view, isn't it? But it's a good one. Going to work is good for your mental health.
And it shouldn't be an old-fashioned view. You know, if you're sitting at home and you're worried and you're anxious and whatever, you're going to get more worried and anxious. And the longer you're off work, the harder it's going to be for you to go back. And what he's saying is, and we've got to take account of this, he's saying it's very good now that we're more aware of mental health. He's saying it's very good that people with serious issues are now being seen and treated in a way they wouldn't have been maybe 10 years ago. But as he said, and Frank Furedi, the great
academic,
he says, you know, that it's right we're discussing it, but there's too many people using it as an excuse. We're medicalising normal problems like anxiety and people being fed.
Relationship breakup.
Jonathan, it feels like the movement towards accepting people who find day-to-day life difficult was incredibly well-intentioned, and we could probably trace that back, 20 years or so, 25, 30 years. That's good. We needed to... Suicide is still the biggest killer of men under the age of 45 in this country. So something needed to be done. But where has it gone wrong? Because I feel like to some degree it has gone wrong, with the younger generation in particular.
Well, I think it depends on where you start asking the question, doesn't it? I mean, you could start from saying, well, we have so many more people who appear to be depressed, who appear to have poor mental health, so that means that we need to do something to tell them they're not actually ill. Whereas actually you could say, what is it about modern society that is making people depressed? What is it about our current society that is making more and more people unable to do work?
What is it, do you think? What is it?
I don't... Carol, I'm not a psychoanalyst, all right, and I'm not an expert in mental health. I mean, I'm fascinated by it. I have often thought about actually retraining it, maybe in my 40s, but that's a separate issue. I do think that mental health is a fundamentally important issue, and it doesn't get the attention it deserves. It might get more words. It might get more words, Andrew. It doesn't get more resources.
It absolutely does. The government has just put aside 2.3 billion, apart from all the benefits that's paying out, to deal with mental health issues.
When you talk to people in mental health, they say they are critically under-resourced. So
of course they would say that.
Part of the NHS is critically under-resourced.
That doesn't make it untrue. Look, the point is, obviously, it's legitimate to have a conversation about can we get more people into work who want to work, who are ready to work, and actually are not at the moment.
Do they want to work?
We could go back into a 1970s, 1980s style Thatcherite. We want the workers and not the shirkers. I just don't think it's a helpful debate to have right now.
So is it okay?
It seems to come round every 15 years, Carol, that we kind of have the benefits claimants are the scourge of society.
What's every 15 years? This is a current problem. You can't sweep it under the carpet by saying it comes around every 15 years. We now have an education system that is teaching kids to be powerless, to feel non-resilient against the things that happen to them in everyday life. The problems that kids are experiencing now, the vast majority, are the kind of anxieties that you had, I had, and all of us at this table had as children. And I'm not saying it's the old-fashioned way, just get on with it and deal with it, but it doesn't entitle you to be off work for years at a time.
I think the thing is, we are actually agreeing on more than we think here, because what you said about what is it about social fabric of today's life that is making more people think they are depressed or to actually be depressed? That's the critical question, isn't it? There's a lot of unhappiness.
Go onto TikTok and you have chances and people with no experience whatsoever telling kids what a mental health issue. They're saying, if you feel this, if you feel that, you've got a mental health issue.
So that's one of the issues.
That should stop.
Social
But we also have to trust doctors, don't we? When doctors say that someone... Right, there are so many reasons. And that's...
My mate's got it, I've got it.
But also, I also think that it should be a political issue. I kind of think that it should take it out... No, it's a political issue about what makes people unhappy. I think that actually it should be... No, Carol...
Not just curing them.
If you may scoff, but it's actually it's legitimate to say how can we improve people's quality of life? We are so focused at left and right.
Do you really think kids today have it worse than kids 25 years ago, 30 years ago? Do you really believe that?
Look, in some ways, yes.
I asked you before. In what way?
Social media, for one. Look, when I was 13 years old at school, I had a tough time for a number of reasons. But my God, I'm glad that I didn't get home at the end of the day, and the bullying didn't continue. For example,
I get
like
that is true. No, I do accept
huge issue.
that.
Kids are killing themselves in their bedrooms without ever leaving their bedrooms because the bullying is constant.
Which one charity is trying to make a political issue, and we're going to talk about this in the next hour, by banning smartphones for the under-16s. I hate banning anything, but I am totally on board with that because it is just criminal what we're doing to children's mental health with mobile phones and being allowed to have them in schools as well. But what else is it? It's diet. People aren't eating well enough. People aren't moving or getting enough exercise. We all know. I think anybody goes to the GP and says I'm depressed, the GP should say, right, for a start, improve your diet, improve your sleep, improve your exercise, come back in 3 months and tell me.
But you know what? It's much easier for a GP to say, who probably has about 7 minutes for a consultation. They say, OK, you're obviously a bit mentally depressed, whatever thing. Here's a note, here's pills, go away, come back in 3 months. That's what they do, because there's no time anymore for anybody.
Well, obviously, I think the medicalising...
And that's if they even get to see a GP.
It's probably an
absolutely.
online
People can't get a GP appointment. I think there's a whole other conversation to be had, by the way, about medicalising human emotions. I think that's a completely legitimate conversation to have about are people. Obviously, there are some people. I've got many friends who say they could not live without their sort of antidepressant medication. But that's how they're experiencing, and I feel very sorry for them and very happy that they are able to function with those pills. But there is a conversation to be had. It's not a political issue.
But rather than demonising Mel Stryford, I think you should welcome
the conversation.
Having this is a proper conversation we should have, and I don't think he is demonising.
I'm not demonising Mel Stryford.
No, you are. You're going on about this is turning back to the Thatcher shirkers versus workers.
I'm saying there is a risk that conversation is underlying this.
Stryford has been very, very clear. He has said it's good that serious mental health problems are being looked at. But what he also says is we cannot be afraid to have this conversation. There are so many conversations, things we can't have conversations about, like diversity, like
we can have conversations about having them right now, Carol. It's such nonsense. We can't have these conversations. Of course,
we can't, because you get demonised. If you have a conversation about the trans group, you're transphobic.
Mel Stryford opened this debate.
Right. And Mel Stryford, it's obviously legitimate to talk about how we can get people into it. What I think is the risk of this is that it then sort of becomes, the ends of the conversation gets chopped off and it becomes a much flatter conversation about people are faking mental illness.
Turning it into that.
No, I'm saying there is a risk that the conversation develops
Do you not
into
think
that.
some people do fake it? Do you not think they do?
Carol,
seriously, answer the question. Do they or do they not?
If you let me answer it, I'll
Come
answer
on,
it. Of course there are people in every single situation who will abuse the system. That doesn't mean that the system needs to change for those people. It means you need to deal with those people who are abusing the system.
When you have millions of people,
I give them the benefit of the
when you
doubt.
have 2.4 million young people off sick, we need to look at why, and we need to sort that problem. You can't have a generation of young people off work and ultimately frightened to go to work because of the anxieties that involve.
I'm not sure
work
we've got an
can't
entire
equal
generation
anxiety.
off work. We've got clearly a number of people who feel they can't work, and that's for doctors to assess what can be done about it. But we have to go back to the austerity years when people who had legitimate illnesses had to go through these incredibly demeaning and degrading assessments, and people took their own lives. It was just such an appalling period, and it's really shameful.
They shouldn't have been assessed.
They shouldn't have been assessed.
The way that people, if you read about the way that people are assessed, about the dehumanisation that took place in people who were sick, when the government was just the overriding objective was to get people into work, and so to ignore actual people's.
Not a bad objective to get people into work.
Not a bad. It's a bad objective.
It's not
that comes at the expense
demonising
of people's
people
humanity.
to question what they're doing. It's not demonising them to examine the illness they are saying they have. And a lot of people, and what Stride says, a lot of people are self-diagnosing now. They're a bit anxious and they go, oh, I'm mentally ill. So they get time off work. That can't be allowed.
I have a friend who's a psychotherapist, and she saw some patients recently, and she said what she's seeing now in her practice for the first time, and been a therapist for 30 years, she has students come in and sit there and they say, I'm worried because I've got exams coming up. And she says, you're meant to be worried. That's what exams is.
We had sleepless nights.
And she said, but they've been taught that normal emotional reactions, like you were saying before, Jonathan, are now not part of the normal human psyche. Which
But
is
people used to suffer in silence before. When I was at university, there were people depressed in their rooms. They never sought any help. I mean, isn't it better when people are actually seeking help?
Not when multi-millions are, no.
The psychotherapist is right. You should be anxious about your exams.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that anxiety about exams is bad.
And I guess there aren't enough people like that psychotherapist who will say, well, you can sit here and pay me £80 an hour and I can indulge your anxiety.
Exactly.
Or I can tell you this is normal.
Exactly.
Have confidence. Life is tough. But you are tougher.
And
not enough people seem to ever feel like they can say that to people, particularly the young.
Because they're being indulged. They're being indulged.
The fact that people are going to your friend like that shows that they want medical help. And
a lot of them do need medical help. You know what? We probably are agreeing on more than we realise here. Right, though, a lot more to come this morning, and more from Jonathan and Carol in the next hour. But first, it's time for the news with Sophia Wensler.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. A long-awaited report has found thousands of women may have been affected by the Department for Work and Pensions' failure to adequately inform them that the state pension age had changed. The Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman has been looking at potential injustices resulting from the decision to raise women's retirement age to bring it in line with men's in 2010. The Women Against State and Pension Equality campaign have lobbied for compensation to address the resulting injustices. They're hoping to be awarded £10,000 in compensation from the government. Government plans to deport migrants to Rwanda have been set back again after the House of Lords inflicted a series of defeats of the bill. 7 proposed changes, including a provision to ensure due regard for domestic and international law, were passed by peers. The bill will now be delayed until after Easter, when MPs will have to vote again. The legislation aims to revive the government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Bank of England is expected to hold the interest rate at 5.25% for the 5th time in a row today. It comes after the inflation rate dropped faster than expected in February, hitting 3.4% during the month, the lowest for 2.5 years. It's good news for the Bank of England and its decision-makers on the Monetary Policy Committee. They still expect the rate to be held steady as they meet today, and the decision will be announced at midday. And it's bad news for chocolate lovers, as some Easter eggs are at least 50% more expensive this year. Researchers are blaming climate change for the increase after dry weather in West Africa led to a spike in global cocoa prices. Brands, including Maltesers, Lindt and Cadbury, cost at least 50% more than a year ago, while others have shrunk in size, and that's according to Which. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2776 and €1.1703. The price of gold is £1,703 and 26 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,806 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, the Met Police are at the heart of another race row. You won't believe what they say in one of their videos to prospective recruits. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
I've got an idea. I think that all 30-year-olds should be given £10,000 from the banks of baby boomers. We've got a situation in this country now where millennials are the first generation in modern times expecting to be poorer than their parents. We, as 30-year-olds like me, are half as likely to own a house as people my age 30 years ago. In fact, the cost of a home in Britain compared to average incomes has as big a gap today as it did, wait for it, in the 1860s. It is a Dickensian situation.
Now, I'm sorry about the housing crisis for your generation.
You're not, though, are you?
No,
because you're profiting from it.
I'm profiting from it. Don't be ridiculous.
The house prices now, compared to that period.
If this is the case, Benjamin...
Have incomes gone up that fast?
To penalise and punish the elderly when they have worked all their lives to put into the system and say it's your fault, whingy, whiny, we're going to be envious...
But we're being punished.
No, by the politics, so be the change you want to see in the world.
Taxes, I am actually, and I'm about to tell you about the change I want to see in the world.
Are you good? As long as it's not whining about it.
I'm going to stop whining about it, but we are being taken advantage of at the moment to profit, to help. Most of taxpayers' money is spent in two departments, the NHS, so the health department, and the Department for Work and Pensions. Those departments disproportionately serve the older population. Now, I've got no issue with that, but let's not pretend that it is not young working people that is paying for the public services for old people. So actually, we are having it hard, and I just look at the future, and we see a future of perpetually higher taxes to pay for this increasing ageing population, a shrinking labour force, and you're here saying we've got nothing to worry about.
The young stop voting for mass immigration parties. The young stop voting for parties
just
that
to point out,
build houses.
Immigrants actually pay taxes, pensioners don't.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, good morning. The Met has been branded embarrassing after footage emerged of its outreach teams telling prospective recruits that black women have to work harder than white colleagues. Is that wrong?
So the outreach team also featured footage of an officer saying he didn't want to invalidate ethnic minorities who were racially abusive to him while on duty. So let's have a look.
Being a woman in today's world and being a black woman does have an extra layer of complexity, however, and struggle, and means that often at times I have to work much harder to be seen, to be heard, and to receive the same level of equality as my white female counterparts.
So joining us now is our reporter Charlie Peters, who uncovered the footage. What's going on here, Charlie?
Well, the Met Connected is the profile we've just seen. This is one of the outreach teams that the Met Police has to improve representation and recruitment from communities that are typically not as representative as the Met Police wants them to be in the force. As you'll remember, a year ago today, the Casey Review was released saying that the Met was institutionally racist, sexist, homophobic. And since then, the Met has been through quite an extensive struggle session to not agree with that analysis. But at the same time, we've uncovered that its outreach teams, its diversity hiring processes are in effect agreeing with that analysis. We've also seen some footage on Met Connected of people wearing VR goggles, virtual reality, to see life as a black female police officer, where they talk about the systemic and institutional and unconscious bias that they witness. So in a way, the outreach team is using the language of the Casey Review that the Met Police is trying to avoid.
And this unconscious bias they witness, is this amongst their colleagues?
That's the claim, which goes even further into saying that the Met Police has an internal and systemic problem. And that is some of the language and the captioning that we're seeing on these Met Connected videos. We haven't got the clip, but other parts of footage that you can see on the website, on the GB News website, includes footage of another black police officer saying that he doesn't want to invalidate people who abuse him in the streets because of the Met's past. He says that he understands it and doesn't want to oppose that situation. Now, I've spoken to critics of this, as you can imagine, there are quite a few. Alka Segal Cuthbert from Don't Divide Us, that campaign group, saying that this was embarrassing and had a whiff of desperation, essentially saying that while it's important to have outreach and to try and include people as much as possible for that recruitment stage, you might not do that if you're telling people black colleagues have to work so much harder to be heard, recognised and progress.
But it will be true, surely. It's true that black women will have to work twice as hard in that environment to be taken seriously.
Well, the Met didn't respond to that claim in particular. They did give us a statement saying that the Met has never been as diverse as it is now. Yeah.
Which is true.
Which is definitely true, and their recruitment outreach has been successful. They have at least a dozen of these outreach teams dotted across London. They used to have one per borough, one for every 32, but that's gone down in recent times from a decade ago. But they are very keen on this outreach programme and do seem to want to defend it to the highest level.
Is this revelation, Charlie, that you've made going to encourage more black men and women to want to join the Met?
Well, here's the question. I mean, if the recruitment is at the highest level, is that because the offer of the job is great, or is it because of this outreach footage in many ways agreeing with some of the negative stereotypes typically associated with the Met, that it is a racist force, that if you're a woman, you're going to struggle more, if you're a black woman, you're going to struggle even more? What's causing that problem, and how are they achieving better levels of recruitment from minorities despite this messaging they're putting out?
I suppose if I was a black woman wanting to apply for the police and I saw a workshop like that where colleagues had VR headsets on to become aware of their own internal racism, bias, whatever you want to call it, I think I'd find that quite reassuring. They're going to understand that I might need or that I might feel a little undervalued in that environment.
But to use the term systemic is the controversy there, because that ties into the Casey report's language about it being an institutional issue. And let's not forget, this is about recruitment. This is outreach. So is it very good for an employer to tell potential employees, because of your identity, you're going to have to work so much harder than others?
They say they're more diverse. How much more diverse is the Metropolitan Police? What is the percentage now of non-white officers?
Well, the stats change every day, day in, day out. They can't keep a latest figure on it, but I'll have the latest figures later today from the press office. They have them up to the end of February. But I think it's not as representative as they want it to be.
No, there's a lot of work to be done.
Let's see a statement. Thank you, Charlie. This is from the Met Police. They said, we're the most diverse we've ever been, but we know that there is more to do. We'll continue every effort to make sure we're attracting a workforce of the future that is as diverse as possible. We're equally committed to making the Met an inclusive place to work where all of our people can thrive.
Now, up next, before he resigned, the Irish PM Leo Varadkar wanted to change the wording in the Irish constitution to include families not based on marriage. It was decisively rejected in a national referendum. Was that the end of his career. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Fine in the south today, some warm sunshine even, but a very different story for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where it is already turning wet and windy. The heaviest of the rain and the strongest winds affecting western Scotland. Bands of rain also moving through eastern and southern Scotland at times, although with some drier spells in between. And then through the late morning and early afternoon, that rain reaches Northern Ireland. Now for England and Wales, a bit of rain for the far north of England, but otherwise plenty of dry weather, even some sunny spells, less breezy here, but even so, out of the breeze, it's going to feel pleasant enough, 15, 16 Celsius. Then the rain tumbles its way southwards overnight. It's going to affect northern England during the evening as well as parts of Wales before it tends to fizzle out and slow down on its journey south. It will eventually end up in the southwest, where it will be a damp start to the day. But the southeast avoids it through much of the night, although staying cloudy here and, as a result, frost-free. But a cold start to the day for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Showers from the word go, interspersed by sunny spells, but it's not going to feel very spring-like with those showers coming in heavy at times and with snow falling above 500 metres for Scotland. The wind very strong in the north and northwest, brighter spells emerging across southern and southeastern parts later, but feeling colder.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, Leo Varadkar resigned as Taoiseach or Irish Prime Minister yesterday. This were his parting words.
I know this will come as a surprise to many people and a disappointment to some, and I hope at least you will understand my decision. I know that others will, how shall I put it, cope with the news just fine. That is the great thing about living in a democracy. There's never a right time to resign high office. However, this is as good a time as any.
So that follows the crushing referendum defeat, where Varadkar tried to change the wording in the Irish constitution to include families not based on marriage. And he won't mention when he kept standing in the way of Brexit, of course.
Well, he was a big opponent to Brexit.
So good riddance, or will he be missed? Of course, he was also the first openly gay Taoiseach as well. So let's speak now to Peter Tatchell and Jamie Bryson. Good morning, gentlemen. Peter, just let's start with you. He really had to fall on this sword, didn't he? This referendum did not go the way that he intended it to do. Why was that in your mind?
Well, I was very surprised by the referendum result because over the last 2 decades, Irish public opinion has become increasingly liberal and progressive, and of course voted massively in favour of same-sex marriage when a referendum was held some years back. But this one was, as you say, it was to extend the definition of a family to all durable relationships. not just those within marriage. So it would extend to include cohabiting couples, both heterosexual and same-sex. Also extended families where mum and dad and kids live together with perhaps elderly grandparents or a sick aunt. So it was an attempt to make the family more inclusive and embracing. The other aspect of the referendum was to expand the constitutional definition of care to remove it from exclusively referring to the duties of women within the home in a bid to sort of make responsibilities in the home more open to everyone, that, you know, everyone in the family, in the home, should be taking responsibilities. It shouldn't just be constitutionally left to women.
Jamie, the Taoiseach completely called this wrong because it was a massive rejection of his attempt to redefine the family. I'm not quite sure why a government thinks it needs to redefine the family. What's it got to do with the government?
Well, I think it's probably a product of, like our own government in Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Westminster. I think some of their policymakers spend far too much time on Twitter and get carried away with the hyper-woke agenda and feel as if they need to do these things. I mean, they would be far better focused on, for example, Leo Varadkar has massive issues in the Republic of Ireland with immigration, with working class people not being able to get jobs and not being able to get proper housing, all of those issues. But instead, this is what he has decided to focus his attention on. So I think he badly misread the mood of ordinary people, and I think it probably follows a trend that we're seeing in America, that we're seeing in Great Britain as well. If you look this morning at the polling for the Forum, is that many ordinary people are just fed up of this utter hyper woke nonsense and actually just want governments to get on and govern as they're meant to do, rather than constantly trying to virtue signal and seeking likes on Twitter. And I honestly do think far too many policymakers are spending far too much time on social media in that small, unrepresentative bubble, and that's driving policy. And the defeat which Leo Varadkar has suffered, I think, demonstrates all of that. But of course, from a unionist perspective, nobody will be sad to see him go. His conduct over trying to stop Brexit was absolutely appalling. He went to the European Union, held up pictures of IRA bombs in an effort to get political leverage. So there's no self-respecting unionist will have any warm words for Leo Varadkar. It's good to see him go. I mean, we want to have federal relations with our nearest neighbour between the two jurisdictions. That's, of course, we do. There was great relationships with, for example, Bertie Ahern and the Kennedy, but in terms of Leo Varadkar, he demolished all of that, and that will be his legacy in terms of unionism.
Peter, I think it's so fascinating, this event in Ireland, actually, because I think what it shows is that the left, we might call them the left, I guess, I'm not sure what that means anymore, but the very, very liberal-minded, those, and I would probably include you in this, Peter, actually, with some of the work you've done over the years, have pushed it so far in terms of redefining traditional terms, man, woman, family, and it's almost the backlash. It feels like that movement always wants more and more and more, and in an attempt to exceed public appetite, the pushback now towards a small c conservative mindset is extraordinary.
Well, you are right at one level. I agree that for the average person in Ireland, like here in Britain, the real focus is the cost of living crisis. People are struggling to make ends meet, and that really should be the focus of every government. Having said that, this referendum was well intended. I think it's good to recognise that there are men and women who do not get married, but live together maybe for 20 or 30 years, bring up their kids well. The idea was to say that they should have a recognition as a family, that the family should not be strictly revolving around people in a traditional marriage. So the principle was good, but I do agree governments have to focus on the bread and butter issues that are really hurting the general population. And, you know, it's right that working class people have been left behind, and that has got to be addressed. That is actually more important than this well-intended constitutional change.
And Jamie, I was just looking at the figures. They're huge. 68% rejected the amendment on changing the definition of the family, 74% on care, about whether it should just mention women. That's massive. A measure of just how badly misjudged this was.
Yeah, and I think, look, there's been this trajectory over recent years of we must do away with all traditional values, all traditional family values. We must dispense with all of that. And I think, as it was very succinctly put in some of the last questions there, where does that end? We're going to redefine a man can now call himself a woman. We're going to redefine biological sex. We're going to redefine the tradition of marriage. We're going to redefine all of these things. And where does it end? There's no traditional anchor in society left. And tradition is not a bad thing. Traditional values is not a bad thing. It's not. And for a number of years, it's almost as if people who hold traditional values and views were demonized and were seen as somehow outcasts. And it was like a popularity contest on social media as to who could be more hyper woke, who could be more ridiculous in order to get likes and retweets. And nowhere we see that more. And I know this wasn't technically part of the Irish referendum than the transgender issue, for example. I mean, where does any of this end? If I decide this morning to self-identify as an elephant, I mean, they're going to put me in the zoo. It's complete and utter nonsense, and people just want their governments to get on with governing. People can live their own lives however they wish within the confines of the law, and we don't need the government in either the Republic of Ireland, which is a foreign country, obviously, or our own government in Great Britain and Northern Ireland meddling in these utter nonsense issues, which are really just fascinations of the hyper woke Twitterati, to be quite honest.
Can I just add there, though, that you have to be very careful about defending traditional values, because traditional values meant that women were second-class citizens, that gay people were criminalized, that a lot of very bad things happened. So I'm not saying toss out traditional values, but I think we need to be very careful defending traditional values, which were often very oppressive to sections of society. And I think it's great that Ireland and Britain have moved on to be more accepting and understanding of people who are different, and particularly
and we have to move on, gentlemen. We have to move on as well. But thank you. Good discussion. Such interesting issues. Let us know your thoughts at home on that. Stay with us. We're going to be looking at the Bank of England, of course. There might be an interest rate change today. Don't go anywhere. Here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split today. Rain moving across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Most of England and Wales dry. Low pressure hitting Iceland, and these weather fronts coming from that low pressure providing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. That rain fairly patchy over northern England, but some showery rain across Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, and a fairly damp afternoon through northern Cumbria. Certainly soggy for a good part of Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, but the far northwest does turn brighter. But it is very blustery here. Much of the south of the UK, yes, a bit misty and murky first thing, but brightening up this afternoon, and where we see a bit of sunshine, very mild again. 16, 17, perhaps even 18 Celsius. The rain, though, is going to trickle south, clearing from Northern Ireland and southern Scotland this evening, spreading into northwest England, then into Wales. So turning damp here, much of the south still mostly dry through the night, turning windy everywhere, particularly across the far north. A very blustery night here with the showers coming in. They'll follow snow over the tops of the hills, and it will turn colder here. Another fairly mild night in the south. Different feel, though, tomorrow morning across the Midlands and East Anglia, much of southern England, seeing cloud and outbreaks of rain. That rain slowly moving across the southeast. So quite a damp day. The rain likely to linger in Kent. It brightens up further north. Lots of showers packing into Scotland and Northern Ireland. Again, some snow on the hills and a chillier feel for all. Temperatures lower tomorrow and feeling even colder with the wind.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, thanks, Alex. Now, this is a hobby horse of Bev Turner's. Should smartphones be banned for children under the age of 16? We're going to be having that discussion. You're with Britain's Newsroom with GB News. You know what she thinks. This is the People's Channel.
there's still time to win our giveaway packed with seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash to make your bank account bloom. Plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Thursday, 11th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Pep Turner.
So, is it time to toughen up? Find out why the Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride thinks that mental health culture has gone too far. You've been divided by this one on the emails, let me tell you.
All eyes on the Bank of England as they decide what to do with interest rates at midday today.
I'm at the Bank of England here in the City of London. The Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, they're in the building behind me. Will they cut interest rates at 12 noon today after yesterday's fall in inflation? Stay with GB News to find out.
I very much hope they do. So a leading charity wants all political parties to put a ban on mobile phones for the under-16s in their election manifesto. I think the vast majority of parents agree with them. We're going to be joined by that charity shortly.
And plummeting birth rates. A new study shows Britain's going to be even more reliant on immigration for the remainder of the century. We're being told of a staggering social change. I think we've already had one of those.
Get in touch with us. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour. Thousands of women may be owed compensation after a report found that the Department for Work and Pensions failed to adequately inform them that the state pension age was changing. The Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman looked at potential injustices resulting from the decision to raise women's retirement age to bring it into line with the men's in 2010. The Women Against State Pension Inequality campaign hoped to be awarded £10,000 in compensation from the government, claiming that millions of women had suffered financially because they weren't warned about the changes. But the report has recommended payments below £3,000. Government plans to deport migrants to Rwanda have been set back again after the House of Lords inflicted a series of defeats of the bill. 7 proposed changes, including a provision to ensure due regard for domestic and international law, were passed by peers. The bill will now be delayed until after Easter, when MPs will have to vote again. The legislation aims to revive the government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. It comes after yesterday was a record day in the Channel as 450 migrants crossed in small boats, the highest number this year so far. Meanwhile, a South Sudanese migrant has been jailed for piloting a dangerously overcrowded small boat as it made its way across the English Channel in August. 31-year-old Chalpan Maika has been caught steering the vessel with 52 other migrants, many of whom were forced to sit on makeshift flooring. The Home Office has released a series of images taken by Border Force. The Bank of England is expected to hold the interest rate at 5.25% for the 5th time in a row today. It comes after the inflation rate dropped faster than expected in February, hitting 3.4% during the month, the lowest for 2.5 years. It's good news for the Bank of England and its decision-makers on the Monetary Policy Committee. They still expect the rate to be held steady as they meet today, and the decision will be announced at midday. The Work and Pension Secretary is warning that Britain's mental health culture has gone too far. Speaking as he unveiled plans to get 150,000 people back into work, Mel Stride said that the benefits bill was being pushed up by a sharp increase in the number of people who are on long-term sickness. In an interview with the Telegraph newspaper, he suggested an increased public focus on talking about mental health had led to people self-diagnosing conditions. It comes as the welfare bill is set to hit £100 billion this year. Shadow Work and Pensions Minister Alison McGovern says Labour has a plan.
What needs to be addressed is to make sure that we have good work in this country that supports people's good mental health, as I just mentioned. And alongside that, we need a mental health system as part of our NHS that can really help people. You know, if you're a child or a young person needing mental health support, the waiting list can be years long, and that's not good enough. So we need Labour's plan to support our health service, including mental health support, with 8,500 extra mental health workers, so that we can improve that quality of service for people. That's Labour's plan.
In other news, 3 staff members from the London clinic are being investigated over allegations that they tried to access the Princess of Wales medical files. The individuals could face prosecution under the data protection laws and also could be sued for damages by Catherine. It's understood the King's medical records were not compromised when he was treated at the same hospital for an enlarged prostate. The London clinic has promised investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken. And it's bad news for chocolate lovers as some Easter eggs are at least 50% more expensive this year. Researchers are blaming climate change for the increase after dry weather in West Africa led to a spike in global cocoa prices. Brands including Maltesers, Lindt and Cadbury cost at least 50% more than a year ago, while others have shrunk in size, and that's according to Which. The Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit says the price hike is down to the impacts of climate change worsened by the El Niño phenomenon, a recurring natural fluctuation in weather patterns in the tropical Pacific. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning, it's 11:06. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. You've been getting in touch at home about the mental health issue, particularly. And Joanne says, I used to be a psychiatric nurse for 25 years. I agree with Mel Stride. The youngsters nowadays do game the system. I saw it firsthand. They openly brag about gaming the benefit system too. The Liberal left have created this, wrapping them up in cotton wool. And Richard says, I live near people who say that they have such issues, but they've never worked. They've got 3 food deliveries a day, courtesy of Just Eat, and seem more than happy to live off the state. So many people are more than happy to collect benefits. There's no contribution to society.
He's raised a very interesting area. I really think well done, Mel Stride. Yeah. He's probably one of the least... Most people probably wouldn't know Mel Stride if he walked in this room.
If he strode in this room?
Nobody would know who he was. But it's a very important debate he's triggered, and I think we need to have a proper discussion. And I was very disappointed to hear the Labour spokesman on breakfast this morning just going, Tories, terrible Tories, 14 years. It's not about that.
Yeah, here's Mel Stride. So if he walks in your room this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, you will know who he is. There he is, walking there purposefully up to the lectern to talk about the fact that...
He's a big Rishi man. He worked with Rishi at the Treasury. But I think he's opened a really important debate.
I do think it's important because... But then similarly, I also feel sorry for teachers who don't quite know how to handle this issue, employers who don't quite know how to handle this, employers who want to say, come on, buck up, you're doing a good job, get up tomorrow morning, come to work, you'll be fine. We'll you know, if you need to take a coffee break, we'll take... But come on, you're all right.
Don't you think working from home is also a factor? Because if you are mentally... If you've got inclinations towards depression and anxiety, working from home, staring at the same wall or a computer screen, not engaging with people, not having a routine about getting on a bus or a train to go to work or walking to work, socialising with people, it all adds to it.
It does. My girls came home from school the other day. I think I told you this story. It was Mental Health Week, and they spent a lot of time talking about it. And she got in the car, she went, oh, Mummy, I feel like I need to have a mental health condition. And it was... Teenagers are so suggestive.
It's the peer group stuff.
It's social contagion. They want to fit in. And therefore... And they're very young, 12, 13, 14. They should be having a nice time and not worrying about mental health.
They should.
Right, moving on.
Yeah.
Joining us now in the studio is barrister Sam Fowles, who I'm sure has got his head in his hands listening to us about that, Sam.
You disagree with me, don't you, Sam?
And you were very honest in the first hour about the fact that you've had some mental health struggles yourself, but we do need to draw a distinction between people like you who've struggled, who've managed it, who've taken responsibility for it, and teenagers who are just looking around going, I need to be mentally unwell to fit in here.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to draw that distinction. I just don't think Mel Stride is doing it. I think what he is doing is treating the end of the problem, saying, I've identified this, I think it's an issue, so I'm going to do something about it by finding someone to punish. Actually, what we need to do is treat the start of the problem. And kids these days, from my generation onwards, are facing far greater stresses than previous.
Sam, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 30. I'm 35 next month.
The fact that you had to even pause to think about that is quite reassuring. 30-years do that as well, Nigel, not just me.
Yeah, large part of my stress at school was not being good at maths, but genuinely though, we've had successive generations where, and I remember doing exams and basically being told it doesn't matter how well you do in your exams because the economy's crashed, you're probably not going to get a very good job.
Really? You were told that?
That was the feeling that all of us had, and that's not just my generation. That's happened to generation after generation, and we are raising groups of kids that are going out into a world that is just hopeless because of the circumstances that have been imposed on us by others. And so it's no surprise there is real mental health difficulties there. And what we haven't done is provided ways of dealing with that. And let me just give you an example of what works. So in my set, we didn't used to, but in my set we realised that if you're mentally healthy, you're going to be a better worker. There's no point having someone that's got going through a mental health crisis, not fully functioning. They're not going to do well in court. They're not going to give good advice. So we come together and we make a big effort to make sure our juniors get the help they deserve, and we pay for it. We fund it.
How many of them have a problem?
There's not that many people in my set, so I'm not going to divulge that.
Percentage?
A rough percentage. Well, we know at school there are, I think it's 3 children out of every class of 30 now will be repeatedly off school.
So that's 10%.
10%,
And 12.5% of kids have an eating disorder at the moment. And so these are really shockingly high numbers. And it's not, 12.5%, you're looking at the millions. They're not all of them making that up.
And these youngsters in your legal set who have to take time off or need some extra support, what are they moaning about? Moaning is a terrible word. What are they expressing their concerns about?
Well, and I'll just talk about myself because I don't want to divulge other people's mental health concerns.
But I don't want personal stories. So Is it paying the rent? Is it family relationships? Is it health?
Yeah, so it is. It's what, I mean, Mel Strider said, yeah, it's these everyday stresses.
Because that's what it's always been around, Sam.
But
it's always been an issue.
But people are different. And firstly, some people have more everyday stresses than others, and you're far more likely to have be struggling with mental health issues if you are in poverty, for example.
Sure.
Which your lawyers aren't.
Well, no. They're not worried about that. But they for me, it was worrying about doing an incredibly difficult job and being able to perform in an incredibly competitive environment and feeling like I wasn't coming up to scratch, even when I was. That's an everyday concern. But if I was thinking about that and worrying about that all of the time instead of performing, I wouldn't have been doing the job that our clients need me to do. So you go away, you get therapy, you get help, and you come back.
What else are they complaining about, the youngsters?
Well, so for example, some people do get concerned about money because at the junior end, you don't get paid until you don't get salary. You just get what you earn. So it takes 6 months to get paid. So you go 6 months without any money.
Whatever that's.
But that is, again, it's an everyday thing that is incredibly stressful, particularly as a result of cost of living, things like that. And for me, it was always the social, being in a social setting, and this can have hugely physical impacts. So one of the ways it affects me is I stop eating. And so just before Christmas, there was, again, purely everyday things, but because of the way my brain is made up, my physiology, they affected me in a certain way. I basically stopped eating for a month, lost loads of weight, and I've been going to therapy every week. I upped my therapy every week to get over that. But all of that costs loads and loads of money.
Were you also the generation that weren't allowed to lose at school? Because for me, I can trace this back. I think it was under Tony Blair when you couldn't have competitive sport in schools. Yeah. They took away competitive sport. So at Sports Day, everyone gets a lolly and, you get a prize, you get a medal for the best smile in the 100 metres running race. Imagine my daughter felt about that. And therefore, we didn't allow children to build resilience because you didn't lose anything. You would never see the exam results on a wall in case it upset their feelings. So different to when we were at school, where we'd be like, well, yeah, you haven't done very well, but you'll be all right, do better next time, buck up.
Well, it was an incentive to do better.
Well, for me, it was... So I was at school in the Blair years, and actually, if anything, it was the opposite.
Right.
There was an incredibly high pressure to win at sports, at academia.
Were you in a private school, Sam?
No, state school. State school. Incredible pressure to win because, and particularly, towards the end, and I did my A-levels at the start of the financial crisis, because we knew there was only a relatively small number of us that were going to have a nice life, and that you had to do everything you could to get into that small group at the very top, and so you had to win all the races, win all the matches, come top in the class.
Sweeping statement. Only a few are going to have a nice life.
This is how it felt when I was a teenager, because we were seeing, in real time, we were seeing the economy collapsing and jobs disappearing around us.
But the economy bounced back.
Well, except it didn't for huge numbers of people. Wages stagnated. So, yeah, people got jobs, but they were bad jobs. They were insecure jobs. And this is another everyday thing that drives your mental health. Having an insecure job, not knowing that you might be able to you're going to be able to come back every day and get a wage, that destroys people.
It's a new phenomenon, though, Sam. That's what I don't get, why this is causing so many mental health issues. But this is a phenomenon that's been around forever.
But you see, I think you are onto something there, because we live in a world now where you can't really start your own... Well, you can start your own small business.
You can.
You can, but it's so expensive. If you wanted to do painting and decorating, or you want to be, a gardener, a plumber, or you can't open a shop. It's no one's buying anything online, so you can't open a little shop on the high street. So what do the jobs look like for this generation? Mainly it's sat behind a computer, typing away, making money for somebody else at the top of the street, and the teenagers are not interested in doing that.
Or riding a bike to deliver Uber Eats or something like that, which, you might be all right one day, but it's going the next day. And I think the reason... Yes, this is... I mean, we could be having this conversation, right, about miners in the 19th century. Same thing, right?
Yeah.
What's different, though, is that we know more about health now. We understand the issues more. You know, we'd be having the same thing about conversation about minors, but we wouldn't understand the drivers of lung cancer. Many more people are diagnosed with lung cancer now because we understand it. It's the same with mental health.
The irony is our life expectancy is going down for the first time in decades. So we're not doing anything terribly well, are we? Sam, really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, still to come, apparently our beloved and traditional hot cross buns are at risk.
What?
We will tell you why. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay, they show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But it is, but there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simply.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Tubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Espresso, that is.
Carol Malone whittering on, you can hear it, yes. We don't even need to introduce you. This is a television studio, Carol. Every time. So I was trying to tell you it's 11:20, but Carol Malone is talking over us as usual. She's the writer and broadcaster.
11:20, guys.
11:20. Jonathan, he said, Jonathan, how'd you put up with her?
Don't ask me that.
Go on, tell us.
I've just bought you a pastry.
Lovely.
I've just bought you a Tano Resame.
Actually, let's just, on a serious point, I think it's really important when you have completely different political opinions that you're always able to engage with someone on a personal level and have a bit of a joke with them. I think that's really important. I think one thing that's sad about politics now is that you kind of just have to be in your camp at all times. And that you kind of can't, that some people don't like fraternising with the other side. I always think that's a mistake. Obviously, there are very, very very deep differences that we have, and you know that does impact on people depending on what the issues are. But I always think it's important to treat a person
Nothing that you can't solve with a panel raiser, in my opinion.
Well, exactly. I know she didn't buy us one.
I know.
And I bought her a brandy last week.
Let's talk about Rwanda, Carol. Right. Goodness me, this bill is going to get ping-ponged back and forth, and it's so frustrating.
It's very interesting, you know, just for people who might not have read the papers yet, this was defeated again yesterday.
10 times.
10 times been defeated. Now, it's really... Dan Hannan wrote a piece in, I think it was your paper, Piers, the other day, saying that, you know, this is more than about immigration now. This has become a matter of sovereignty now.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely true, because we have a bunch of Liberal judges and a bunch of unelected peers led by Windbag Welby who are trying to thwart government policy.
They are.
This policy was voted on overwhelmingly in the Commons, and it should have been passed. The Lords are supposed to be a revising chamber. It's not supposed to be a chamber where they just chuck out government policy that they don't like. And that's what they're doing. They're showing zero respect for the Commons, the elected chamber, and for the vote that was passed in there, and deciding to follow their own left-wing, largely, agendas on immigration. And it's just not on.
I agree with that, but here's my problem with it. I was at a reception last night. There were a lot of Lords there.
Yeah.
And they were perplexed that this is supposedly emergency legislation. Why isn't it being rushed through the Commons today? It's not going to come back till after Easter. Is this an emergency? Why doesn't Rishi engage? It is an emergency.
Not an emergency.
Why doesn't he engage with it and get on with it? Instead, it's going to wait until after Easter, which means we won't get a plane in there till June.
Why are all the papers saying, and I thought, why are all the papers saying that they can't do anything to after Easter because of the defeat last night? Tell us what they can do.
They can just rush it through as emergency votes in the Commons immediately. They're in charge of the procedure. They've got a majority of 50.
So is your thought... Oh, OK.
They can't force the Lords to accept the amendments, though.
They can eventually, because ultimately...
Well, Parliament Act. Oh, good, let's have an election, then we can do that in the next Parliament.
because there is... Commons has had that passes with a majority of 48, a very healthy majority. These are unelected bishops. Why are they even there in the first place?
Can I just say, I'm absolutely thrilled that we have consensus on an entirely elected House of Lords here, because, of course, we wouldn't want the House of Lords. No, I think we have consensus on a fully elected House of Lords, because you're complaining about unelected Lords, so presumably that means that we need an elected Lords.
There shouldn't be. I don't necessarily think we need them. I don't necessarily think we need the House of Lords.
I'm all in favour of
either
a fully elected Lords or no Lords at all. I'm glad that we have consensus on that issue, because we can't possibly only disagree with the Lords if we don't like what they say.
All they're doing is delaying.
Well, Keir Starmer actually does want to have a fully elected House of Lords.
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
Well,
He did,
Jonathan,
want to have that. In the next 5-year Parliament, where they'll have a large majority, they won't go near House of Lords reform.
Look, if we want to have a constitutional discussion, I'm very happy to have that, because I think that we should have full proportional representation and a fully elected House of Lords. But in the meantime, if you're going to have a House of Lords, then you accept what the point of the House of Lords is. You can't just move the goalposts.
I just said it's a revising changer. It's not there to thwart government policy.
No, Carol, you're wrong, because it's not a manifesto commitment. Rwanda was not mentioned in the 2019 manifesto. The only convention is that the Lords will not...
It's been voted on in the Commons.
Carol, the only convention of the House of Lords is that they don't vote down manifesto commitments. They have a mandate constitutionally. They can do what they like. The government can force through its legislation with the Parliament Act after the Parliament has ended.
The Conservative manifesto said it would cut immigration.
Didn't say anything
illegal
about
immigration.
And it certainly
and this
didn't say
is the means they're doing it by. This is how they're doing it. This is how they're doing it. This is how they're doing it, by the Rwanda bill. No. And you know this will be passed eventually. Why don't they just get on with it?
What a ridiculous argument. You know it will be passed eventually.
Well, it will.
Look, either you have a Lords with the right of peers to amend legislation as they see fit.
For how long?
Or you don't have a Lords. You can't just say it'll be voted down eventually.
You know why they're delaying it? They're delaying it because they think that Labour is going to get in soon and they won't have to do it at all.
Well, Labour is going to get in soon. I mean, that's not unreasonable, but I think that's a reason to do it. It might just be, Carol, that they don't like the policy and they don't like the Supreme Court issuing a judgment and then MPs saying it's not, it's factor, but it can change.
If the left had any policies at all on immigration, I might be willing to buy into the argument, but they don't. Keir Starmer has no policies on immigration.
He's going to get the gangs.
Yeah, he's got the gangs. That's what
when it comes to immigration, I'm certainly not on Keir Starmer's side. I think that what I do find completely outrageous, though, when James Cleverly says, while Labour and their allies, people are risking their lives in the hands hands of people who don't care if they die as long as they pay. The talking needs to end so we can get on with the job of saving lives and stopping the votes. It's so completely disingenuous. That is effectively gaslighting. That's James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, saying that their legislation is saving lives.
People haven't
if they
died
wanted
on
to
those
save
votes.
lives, if they wanted to save lives, they could allow people to come here safely and legally in order to claim asylum,
So
or they could have
everyone who
processing
wants to
centres
come,
in France.
So in your
No.
world, everyone who wants to come here gets to come.
No, that's literally not what I
will that
said.
work?
What I said is the people who want to claim asylum, which is an internationally recognised human right, should have the right to come here, not
It's
through
interesting
people smugglers,
they're
but
coming
on licensed
they're
vehicles
coming
so
via
they can claim
France,
asylum when
which
they
is
come
a
here.
safe country.
That doesn't matter,
It
Carol,
does
under
matter.
international law. That's not
They're
international
coming
law doesn't
here
say
because they know
anything
it's
about-
easier.
No, that's,
we're a soft touch.
there are all kinds of reasons why
This
people
is
might come.
this is a brilliant example of illustration of kind of what's going on with this bill, isn't it? Back and forth. But while we're hot and cross, should we talk about hot cross bun?
Yeah, we certainly should.
Apparently,
Right.
Iceland, Carol, are
Yes.
selling them with a tick instead
Yes.
of a cross.
I mean, do you know what?
Oh, you're not serious.
Do you know why this infuriates me? Because a lot of Christians are quite rightly offended. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're a Christian anymore in this country. You can be they can offend you as much as they like.
Yeah.
If the hot cross bun was part of an Islamic tradition, I can bet my bottom dollar that
it's just...
It is not.
Carol,
it
it's
is
nonsense.
not. But you can offend a Christian in this country and no one gives a damn. And Christians are
first of all,
upset.
that's not...
They've got rid of the Christian symbol on a tin of syrup, for God's
Look,
sake.
it's obviously daft. It's stupid.
Why?
Someone has done
But
this because I mean, it kind of it makes me laugh to see it.
But
It's not,
it makes
I'm
you
not
laugh.
offended.
Are you a Christian? Are you
I'm
a
not,
Catholic?
look,
No.
I'm not. I'm not a
The people
Christian.
who are
I can understand.
offended.
Look, it's an item of confectionery, Carol. You're
So what?
eating it.
So
people
what?
are eating buns. So can we just put it in
with
perspective? Sometimes people got
you
upset
could
about
say,
the M&S Christmas.
you could say someone has a banner with something horrible about the Christian church on, but that's all right because that's just a piece of paper.
Well, actually, we have blasphemy laws in this country, which
Well, we don't
which,
actually.
Well, we still have some blasphemy
We don't.
legislation.
No, we
when
don't.
when was the blasphemy legislation?
Abolished in 2008.
Okay, fine. So
Get your facts right.
okay, fine.
Well,
Sounds
I'll tell
correct.
you what,
But
I
very
think
recently we had blasphemy legislation, which put us in line with sort of countries like Saudi Arabia. I don't think that we're leading the way on religious freedom in this country.
It's a really pitiful little change by Iceland, isn't it?
It's silly. It's silly.
It's pitiful.
I don't know why they've done it.
Why have they done it? Because it is going to cause
If you think
huge
about it, they
offence.
obviously some youngsters
Because they knew we talked about on GBNews and boost their sales figures, Andrew. That's
they
why.
probably thought that a tick is opposite to a cross. It's not an emoji. It's a Christian symbol. That's got to be what it is. Somebody in an office
It's something that you put in your
let's do
gob and
something
gets
different. We won't have a
digested.
cross.
That's not
We'll have a
blasphemy,
tick.
is it?
It's a tradition. What's wrong with tradition,
Nothing's
Jonathan?
Am I defending it? There's nothing wrong with tradition.
And it's
All I'm saying is
Christian
it's a
tradition.
cake. It's a
It's a
cake. It's not
Christian-
burning down a church.
It's a Christian tradition.
It's
a
just
Christian
outrageous.
tradition.
Because by your logic, it means people can walk around with banners, with things that really offend. We're upset currently about stuff being held up about Jewish people. We're saying that is ultimately prosecutable. But that's all right.
That's hate speech, Carol. That's
Well,
hate
I'm
speech.
not
It's
saying
not
the
a hot cross bun
story is hate speech. I'm not going as far as to say that. But as Andrew says, this is Christian tradition.
It is.
Don't laugh at Christian tradition.
I'm not laughing
because
at
you
Christian
actually
traditions. I'm
upset a
laughing
lot
at
of people
hot cross
watching.
buns.
No, you're laughing at Christian tradition.
No, I'm not, Carol. This is
Right,
silly.
listen, as this is the way in these days,
Yeah.
you've got to have a statement from Iceland.
Oh,
David
God.
Lennox
God.
has said,
Yeah.
according to research, it seems that some people
Why?
want to do away with the cross design and move to a tick instead.
Publish the research.
The results surprised us.
I bet it did.
We're putting it to test by trialling ticks
I am
on
boycotting.
some of our buns.
I'm boycotting their buns. Not
Me
that I
too.
go to Iceland.
I was
but
just
if I
saying
did,
neither, but
if I
I'm
did,
not
I
going
would
now.
boycott it.
Me too.
Exactly.
A far more important Easter story, as far as I'm concerned, is the story that people are paying 50% more for Easter eggs.
Oh, yeah.
And that sort of sizes are going down as well, and that people can't afford the
Oh,
things
who
that they
cares?
could
That's just
afford
a tradition.
before.
Easter eggs, just a
Yes,
tradition,
just
Jonathan.
a tradition they are.
Well, the cost of living
Exactly
crisis is a tradition under this government, Andrew.
Yeah, but just exactly the same as the hot cross bun is
Yeah, yeah,
tradition.
just a
So is an
tradition.
Easter egg. So what's
Well, I'm not saying that.
what are you upset
I'm not
about?
in favour of ticks, Carol. Why are you accusing me of being in favour of ticks? I'm just saying it's not the end of the world.
No, you're saying traditions don't matter.
Can I just say that if talk about revelation and blasphemy, Andrew Pearce has a hot cross bun with no butter.
I do.
What
Do you
kind of
really?
I don't
food
like
pervert
butter.
are
I've
you?
never liked
You
butter.
don't like chips and you don't have butter on
I
a
don't
hot
like
cross
chips.
bun.
Fish and
Why,
chips.
what's wrong with
outrageous.
butter? You've got to have. It's got to
It's all about
stick in.
butter. It's all about the
no.
butter and the cross.
But I like the
Carol,
hot
do you get
cross
upset
bun.
about chocolate
I like the cross bun
buns?
hot. but without butter.
Because, you know, there are lots of non-traditional hot cross buns with chocolate
and I pick
in
the
them
raisins out.
With all kinds of things.
I'm finding out revelations here. Hang on. He's picking out raisins. Why do you have...
No, I eat them.
that religious...
And then I eat the hot cross buns.
OK, right, we've got to move on. Sophia is waiting very patiently. Is it time to ban mobile phones for under 16s? We're going to get stuck
I want her view on hot cross buns.
After the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. At least 300 migrants have arrived across the Channel in 8 small boats today. Yesterday was a record day for crossings, as 514 migrants were intercepted by Border Force, the highest number this year so far. It comes as government plans to deport migrants to Rwanda have been set back again after the House of Lords inflicted a series of defeats of the bill. 7 proposed changes were passed by peers. MPs will vote on the bill in the Commons on the 15th of April after the Easter recess. Meanwhile, a South Sudanese migrant has been jailed for piloting a dangerously overcrowded small boat as it made its way across the English Channel in August. 31-year-old Chal Panmaker was caught steering the vessel with 52 other migrants, many of whom were forced to sit on makeshift flooring. The Home Office has released a series of images taken by Border Force. Thousands of women may be owed compensation after a report found that the Department for Work and Pensions failed to adequately inform them that the state pension age was changing. The Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman looked at potential injustices resulting from the decision to raise women's retirement age to bring it in line with men's in 2010. The Women Against State Pension Equality campaign hoped to be awarded £10,000 in compensation from the government, claiming that millions of women had suffered financially because they weren't warned about the changes. But the report has recommended payments of below £3,000. And 3 staff members from the London clinic are being investigated over allegations that they tried to access the Princess of Wales medical files. The individuals could face prosecution under the data protection laws and also could be sued for damages by Catherine. It's understood the King's medical records were not compromised when he was treated at the same hospital for an enlarged prostate. The London clinic has promised investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2765 and €1.1693. The price of gold is £1,729 and 63 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,813 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon.
Yep, Emily and Tom are here to tell us what's going on.
Not up at noon today.
Richard.
What? We have an extra 3 or 4 minutes of our programme today. It's very exciting.
Are you eating into our time?
We've stolen your airtime.
No, we're not.
Bev and Andrew.
You can take more if you want.
You can
clock
off
early. Can we go now? 25 minutes.
At midday, we've got a very exciting decision from the Bank of England. Will our mortgage costs all come down? Will interest rates start to trickle down? Well, we'll learn that at midday. So we're coming on a little bit earlier today, so we've got time to cross across to the Bank of England.
What's your hunch?
I think they can stay the same.
I do. I think they probably...
But it's still very exciting. It's still very exciting and worth clinging on to see.
Because also, it's not just about the headline decision. It's the members of the Monetary Policy Committee. What way do they vote? If a number of them vote to come down, even though the majority vote for it to stay, that's going to give the market various signals.
Sure.
And, of course, the commercial rates, market rates, are ever so slightly looking forward in terms of what the Bank of England rate will be in the future. So it could be that mortgage rates come down, even though the Bank of England rate stays the same.
Which
so
would be great, because so many people are coming out of their fixed mortgage rate deals at the moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What else, guys? What else?
Another thing that's going down is British people having babies. And
or not having babies.
Across the whole entirety of the West, really. This new report out today saying that essentially we're going to have to plug the gap because people aren't having babies. We'll have to continue to plug the gap with immigration till 2,100, which is the end of the century, of course, and we'll be looking into the implications of that, whether it's true, whether it's true, and what we can do to encourage people to have more children.
But it's entirely the case that we're living longer. We're requiring more healthcare as we get older because there are so many more amazing innovations. It costs more to keep people alive for longer. We're expecting gold-plated pensions that rise by more than inflation each year. That's been happening recently. How is it all paid for if there are fewer and fewer people of working age in the country? Either we have more babies or we have more immigration.
Or immigrants also get old, don't they?
Well, of
and
course.
also have dependents, so that is a cost. What needs to happen is people need to feel like they can have more children.
And
at the moment, they don't.
No government's going to engage with this because it's a long-term issue and they won't be around. So they don't care.
Exactly, and this is so often the case. If it's a decision that affects people 10 years down the line, it's not going to happen.
It's all about short-termism.
Right, thank you both, Emily and Tom,
And they're
from
going to be here
Midday.
early.
Just before midday. We get a few more minutes off it by the sounds of it, though. For now, you're with Britain's Newsroom. Don't go anywhere. Mobile phone ban after the break.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism. And parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:40. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, a surprising new poll, not that surprising to me, has revealed that a whopping 58% of parents think that the government should ban smartphones for under 16s, with more than 4 in 5 parents saying that the devices are harmful for children and young people.
Well, we're joined now by Frank Young, who's from the charity Parent Kind, who carried out the survey. And Frank, I think it's fair to say that's where you are. You think these phones should be... Well, what age would you allow them to have? 18, maybe? 17?
Well, I think Parent
across the country have been pretty clear. 16 is the age that they want the law to allow children to have smartphones for the first time. Dumb phones are absolutely fine before 16, but smartphones with all the access to internet grizzlies, 16 and above.
What kind of harms do they cause to children? Do we know now empirically, Frank?
We increasingly understand some of the harms of smartphones. Only this week, a new book was published by Professor Jonathan Haidt from New York University, outlining some really serious new data that shows that smartphones are addictive. They can cause mental health problems, particularly in girls. And of course, they just provide a gateway to some of the awful stuff that we, as parents, are very aware of online. And that's why parents overwhelmingly get it, that smartphones need to be banned. And I think on this, they're miles ahead of the politicians.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of banning anything. I'm a big fan of personal responsibility, actually. But what I'm finding, particularly in my experience of my three and the friends of mine who have children, is that this is one area in which we really want help from the government. It's a bit like telling your child to put your seatbelt on in the car. When they're toddlers, they don't want to put their seatbelt on. But when you say, if you don't put your seatbelt on, the policeman could stop mummy, they put their seatbelts on. Why are we so detached? Why is it that politicians are not tapped into this issue, Frank, like parents are?
Well, firstly, parents agree with you. About 2/3 say that if a government or a future government brings in a ban for under 16s and smartphones, that would help them to have the conversation with their children, particularly their teenagers, about smartphones. I just think that this is a developing area of policy. Smartphones haven't been around for that long, maybe 15 years or so. And unfortunately, I think it takes time in Westminster for science and evidence to get to a stage where politicians feel they need to act. But today's poll is a real warning sign from parents themselves to politicians that ahead of a general election, they need to be making this one of the really big issues.
Do you think, Frank, I'm conscious in Scotland you can vote at 16. Labour, I think it's part of their manifesto to let 16-year-olds have a vote. So I'm not sure you're going to get many political parties going to embrace this and put it in their manifesto for that very reason.
Well, this is the start of a conversation, and we're not the only group that are now coming out and saying, look, we're really concerned about the impact of smartphones. We speak up for parents. And we've sent this poll to all the political parties, and we want to start that conversation now. You know, if there are 16-year-old voters in the future and they have a different view, that's fine. That's how democracy works. But there are an awful lot of parents out there with young children, particularly those still in primary school with their teenage years to come, who are really, really worried about what might happen to their child in the next few years.
OK, thank you so much. And on a personal note, thank you for the work you're doing. I speak for me and all my mates. We're absolutely bang on board with what you're trying to achieve here. So well done, Frank Young there, Director of Policy and Research at charity Parent Kind.
I bet it won't happen.
It won't happen.
Even though parents might want it.
You know why?
Governments listen to that.
Because there's not enough parents who are MPs. And I've discussed it with a few of the more elderly gentlemen MPs that I've met. They don't understand it, they don't get it, their children are long grown up and gone, they don't understand what we're dealing with. Miriam Case, it's no coincidence that she's one of the MPs who is absolutely championing this, and she's a mum and she's got young kids, so she gets it. Right, still to come, we're going to find out whether the Bank of England will cut interest rates. Will they? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Fine in the south today, some warm sunshine even, but a very different story for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where it is already turning wet and windy. The heaviest of the rain and the strongest winds affecting western Scotland. Bands of rain also moving through eastern and southern Scotland at times, although with some drier spells in between. And then through the late morning and early afternoon, that rain reaches Northern Ireland. Now for England and Wales, bit of rain for the far north of England, but otherwise plenty of dry weather, even some sunny spells, less breezy here, but even so, out of the breeze, it's going to feel pleasant enough, 15, 16 Celsius. Then the rain tumbles its way southwards overnight. It's going to affect northern England during the evening as well as parts of Wales before it tends to fizzle out and slow down on its journey south. It will eventually end up in the southwest, where it will be a damp start to the day. But the southeast avoids it through much of the night, although staying cloudy here and, as a result, frost-free. But a cold start to the day for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Showers from the word go, interspersed by sunny spells, but it's not going to feel very spring-like with those showers coming in heavy at times and with snow falling above 500 metres for Scotland. The wind very strong in the north and northwest, brighter spells emerging across southern and southeastern parts later, but feeling colder.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
So it is 11:48. The Bank of England is expected to hold the base rate of interest at 5.25% today, keeping it at a 15-year high.
We're going to get that announcement at midday. We're going to find out for certain in about 10 minutes. But first, we're going to bring in our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, whose finger is always on the pulse about this. Liam, you've been gloomy about the Bank of England. There we are. Thank you very much. Finger on the pulse about interest rates for a long time. They're not in step with what you think.
No, I mean, back in 2021, when some of us could see inflation coming and the Bank of England kept interest rates ultra low, I became quite critical and said rates should have gone up then. And similarly now, I think the Bank of England is behind the curve. I think they should be cutting rates today. We saw inflation fall from 4% during the year to January. So prices went up 4% during the 12 months from January 2023 to 2024. That inflation number, that headline inflation number, came down to 3.4% yesterday for February, but that's still quite a long way above the Bank of England's inflation target of 2%. But you can see the direction of travel here. You can see the way inflation is going around the world. So I think the Bank of England should be getting a rate cut in now. We've got the 9 economists on the Monetary Policy Committee. They're holed up in the Bank of England behind me. Any minute now, well, in 11 minutes at 12 noon, we'll find out whether or not, as you say, Bev, interest rates stay at 5.25%, a 16-year high where they've been since August last year, or whether they'll start to come down. Of course, lots of us with mortgages, with personal loans, want those interest rates to come down, and already in anticipation of the fact that rates, or the judgment that rates are likely to come down in the coming months, mortgage companies have already started to lower their lending rates. But it isn't probably going to happen today. We're probably going to see interest rates stay at 5.25%. That is my best guess.
And just briefly, Liam, there's a number of people on this monetary committee. We will get guidance, won't we, as to who voted which way?
Indeed, there won't be a big inflation report today. We'll just get the minutes of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee meeting. We'll see the split of votes, whether it's 5-4 or 6-3 or whatever it is, to hold or to cut. But just as recently as last month, some members of the Monetary Policy Committee were still voting to raise rates, which I don't really understand at all. But look, there's a widespread expectation across the money markets, across the business world, that we're going to see rates held today. Though having said that, earlier this morning, the Swiss Central Bank, I know you noticed it, Andrew and Bev, the Swiss Central Bank surprised the markets by cutting rates. But I don't think that's going to happen here. But, you know, we'll see in about 10 minutes' time.
OK. Thank you very much, Liam. Liam Halligan there at the Bank of England, where he will be bringing you that rate decision live. Let's just finish off the show by looking at some of the things that you've told us this morning. That Leo Varadkar debate we had earlier.
That's really interesting.
I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of the show today, and what was, no doubt, 2.5 hours, very interesting. Tim has got in touch to say Leo Varadkar, he got it wrong again. The view of the public in Ireland is the opposite of the establishment. Varadkar is what is wrong with the establishment. And Carol said Ireland has its own values and mindset. They've been badly let down by Varadkar. It's wonderful that he's gone. I don't think the vote was entirely against the proposals. It was used as a vote to get rid of him. Now, we were discussing that, weren't we?
Yeah. I also wonder as well whether Ireland was traditionally a very Catholic country. Varadkar, openly gay man, good luck, the first openly gay Taoiseach. Were they thinking, why is he telling us how to define our families? That's right. And also on mental health, we've been talking about this all morning. Richard's saying lots of people near him who are just using it as an excuse to claim benefits. That is it. Britain's Newsroom from us for this week. We'll see you next week.
That's right. See you Monday.
On Good Afternoon Britain today, not just that fated interest rate decision, but much more. Did the House of Lords put lives at risk last night by yet again delaying and frustrating the Rwanda bill? This, as we learn, people have been stabbed in the Channel on their way across to Britain. Is it time to get tougher?
And why aren't Brits having more babies? The birth rate has plummeted substantially, and a new report is warning that more immigration is going to be needed to plug that gap. We'll bring you that after the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split today. Rain moving across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Most of England and Wales dry. Low pressure hitting Iceland, and these weather fronts coming from that low pressure providing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. That rain fairly patchy over northern England, but some showery rain across Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, and a fairly damp afternoon through northern Cumbria. Certainly soggy for a good part of Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, but the far northwest does turn brighter. But it is very blustery here. Much of the south of the UK, yes, a bit misty and murky first thing, but brightening up this afternoon, and where we see a bit of sunshine, very mild again. 16, 17, perhaps even 18 Celsius. The rain, though, is going to trickle south, clearing from Northern Ireland and southern Scotland this evening, spreading into northwest England, then into Wales. So turning damp here, much of the south still mostly dry through the night, turning windy everywhere, particularly across the far north. A very blustery night here with the showers coming in. They'll fall as snow over the tops of the hills, and it will turn colder here. Another fairly mild night in the south. Different feel, though, tomorrow morning across the Midlands and East Anglia, much of southern England, seeing cloud and outbreaks of rain. That rain slowly moving across the southeast. So quite a damp day. The rain likely to linger in Kent. It brightens up further north. Lots of showers packing into Scotland and Northern Ireland. Again, some snow on the hills and a chillier feel for all. Temperatures lower tomorrow and feeling even colder with the wind.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Didn't quite believe it and still can't.
And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 21st of March.
Interest rates in just a few moments' time. We'll be live outside the Bank of England at the Monetary Policy Committee announce their latest decision on interest rates. Could your mortgage finally cost a little bit less?
Stabbings in the Channel as the House